Picture this. You are a peasant girl in a remote English village, the air heavy with the scent of wood smoke and sweat, your hands raw from days of harvest. Tonight is your wedding night. The cottage is colder than you imagined, its stone walls slick with damp straw mattress prickling through your thin linen shift. Through the rough-hewn door you can hear drunken voices rising and falling. Your new husband's brothers, neighbors, half the village, waiting outside in the dark. They have no intention of leaving until they hear what is expected of you. Your new husband, red-faced and smelling of ale, stands over you, his shadow flickering against the walls by firelight. But he is not the only presence in this room. The priest who married you that morning made his instructions clear. Proof of consummation must be given before dawn. If not, this marriage is as good as void. If you fail, you risk everything: your family's land, your own safety, even your life. There will be questions, there will be witnesses, and there will be no escape. Tonight, your body is not your own. The woolen blanket scrapes across your bare legs as you are pushed onto the bed. Every creak of the old frame echoes through the night, a signal for those gathered outside. Your husband's hands are calloused, unyielding. The pain is real, but you dare not cry out, not yet. The true test is still to come. You can feel eyes on you even through the door, the weight of 100 unspoken demands pressing down like the stone ceiling itself. In this room, you are not a person. You are evidence. Think wedding nights are private. Think again. In medieval villages, your most intimate moment is a public event. It is not just your husband you must please, but the entire community. The ritual is called the bedding ceremony. After the feast, you are led to the marriage bed by singing, jeering friends and relatives. They laugh, they shout crude blessings, they even help undress you. Then they leave you, but not really. Their presence lingers just beyond the wall, ears pressed close, waiting for a sound that will confirm the act is done. But here's where it gets worse. If you do not scream, if there is not pain, not proof, the marriage is suspect. The next morning, you will be forced to display the bloodied sheets, held up in front of your family, your husband's kin, the priest, even the village elders. No blood, no honor, and without honor, you are nothing. Your mother's warnings ring in your head. Better to bleed now than to burn later. For a peasant bride, your wedding night is a test of pain, performance, and survival. Everything you thought you knew about marriage, about intimacy, is about to be shattered. This is not a private union of two lovers, but a public ordeal governed by rules older than memory. The church does not simply bless your marriage, it owns your body. Medieval law, like the canon of the church, demands evidence not just of union, but of virginity lost, pain endured, and blood spilled. If you fail, you may be cast out, declared a fraud, or worse, branded as unchaste, a danger to your family's name. In 14th century England, parish records show that failure to provide proof of blood on the wedding night could bring ruin. There are documented cases where brides who failed this test were returned to their families in disgrace, forced into servitude, or even accused of witchcraft. One account, preserved in the legal rolls of 1352, tells of a girl named Marjorie who, unable to produce the required evidence, was stripped, inspected by the midwife and priest, and ultimately driven from her home. The entire community became judge, jury, and executioner, all on the strength of a single stained sheet. But why such cruelty? Why this ritualized invasion of a young woman's body and soul? The answer lies in the machinery of medieval power. For the church, every marriage was a sacrament, and every sin a threat to the community's salvation. For the village, your virginity was family currency. Blood on the sheets meant property secured, alliances honored, and peace preserved. Without it, the fragile bonds holding the community together could unravel in a single night. Even as you lay trembling in the darkness, the system that owns you is already grinding into motion. The priest waits outside, ready to question you at dawn. Your new mother-in-law is preparing her inspection. The law is on their side, not yours. Tonight, you are both witness and evidence, caught in a web of ritual, suspicion, and fear. Your suffering is not a secret. It is the foundation of the village's fragile order. But the horror is only beginning. What happens if you do not bleed? What if the pain is not enough, the evidence not convincing, your body judged used or tainted for reasons beyond your control? The next revelation will make your skin crawl. This night is only the start. The moment the door creaks open, your ordeal begins anew. Before you can even dress, your mother-in-law steps into the room, face hard as flint. Her eyes go first to the sheets, her hands reaching for the fabric. You watch, helpless as she inspects them for blood. The others crowd behind her, pushing into the narrow space, their breath steaming in the chill air. Someone whispers a prayer, but it's not for your comfort. It's for confirmation. Your pain has become public property. The priest arrives, robes trailing through the straw. He carries a ledger and a look of deep suspicion. "Show us," he commands, and you obey because you have no choice. He bends over the cloth, searching for evidence, fingers stained with wax and dirt. His verdict is everything. If he nods, your marriage stands. If not, your life unravels. This ritual is older than the church itself. Medieval England, France, the German states, all held the bedding ceremony as a sacred test. Failure meant disgrace, but here's where it gets worse. The blood must be fresh, the screams convincing. Your silence can doom you. If you are unlucky enough not to bleed, if your body, by fate or accident, betrays you, the consequences are swift and brutal. Some brides, terrified of what would happen if the sheet stayed white, take matters into their own hands. The night before the wedding, you might prick your finger with a needle, smuggle a vial of animal blood beneath your shift, or even scrape yourself raw in desperation. Anything to survive what comes next. Failure is not an option. But sometimes even these desperate measures are not enough. If the proof is doubted, the priest may demand a physical examination. The women of your husband's family hold you down, their faces blank with practiced cruelty as the midwife inspects your most private flesh by candlelight. She murmurs her findings aloud, intact, torn, suspect, each word a judgment, each breath a verdict. You are stripped of dignity, left as nothing but a specimen to be measured and recorded. Historical records from Norfolk, 1378. Bride brought forth before the elders, no sign of virginal blood. Questioned at length by priest and midwife, sent back to her father's house in shame. In Yorkshire, a girl of 15 was burned as a witch. After failing to bleed, her mother accused of teaching her forbidden arts. This isn't myth, it's documented reality. And the crowd outside? They're not leaving. You hear laughter, curses, even bets placed on whether your union will take. The men drink, the women gossip. Children peek through cracks in the shutters, eyes wide with morbid curiosity. The community waits for the verdict because your suffering is their entertainment, your body a stage for their rituals. But here's where the nightmare sharpens to a point. If you are found wanting, you are not merely shamed. You can lose your dowry, your family's last hope of climbing out of poverty. You can be sent away, marked as spoiled goods, unable to marry again. In some villages, old laws demand even harsher penalties. One 14th-century account describes a young woman forced to parade through the village in nothing but her shift, a scarlet letter sewn into the fabric, her hair shorn as a warning to others. Yet the worst humiliation is reserved for those who are accused of deception. If the elders suspect you of faking the evidence, if the blood looks false or the screams rehearsed, you risk charges of fraud, even heresy. Medieval penitentials describe punishments for such women: public whipping, exile, in rare cases, death by fire. The logic is twisted. Either your body proves its suffering, or you must suffer all the more. It's not only your reputation at stake but your family's survival. A failed bride can drag her parents into ruin, force her sisters into worse marriages, drive her brothers to violence. Every mother fears this outcome. Every father dreads the knock at the door that signals disgrace. The bedding ceremony is not about love. It is about control. Control of bloodlines, property, and the most intimate corners of your life. A manual of confession from 1322, preserved in the Vatican archives, contains chilling instructions. If the woman doth not bleed, inquire closely. If she protest too much, suspect guile. If she be found false, let her be cast out. These words are not relics. They are marching orders for every priest, every family, every neighbor who claims a right to your pain. But the real horror is how easily the ritual becomes routine. Neighbors joke about bedding nights. Mothers teach their daughters how to make themselves bleed. Village midwives pass down techniques as if they were family heirlooms. Survival becomes a skill, and suffering is the price of belonging. If you endure, you are considered lucky. If you break, you are simply forgotten. Now, after hours of waiting, the priest finally gives his nod. The blood is deemed sufficient. Your husband's family cheers. Someone pounds on the shutters in drunken celebration. You feel nothing but emptiness, relief edged with humiliation, the knowledge that you have passed a test that should never have existed. But the memory of this night will never leave you. Every time you walk past those neighbors, every time the priest calls your name, every time your body aches with the knowledge of what was taken from you, you will remember. And if you're beginning to see the pattern, how the community, the church, and the law all conspire to make your pain a public ritual, then you're already peering into the hidden machinery that shaped medieval life. Right now, you're feeling the weight of these revelations pressing down. This discomfort you're experiencing, it's the recognition of truth, one that history has tried to bury. If you want to keep uncovering these buried testimonies and confront the realities that shaped lives in the shadows, subscribe now. This journey is just beginning. And what comes next will change everything you thought you knew about intimacy, power, and survival in the medieval world. You thought the horror would end once you survived the wedding night, but in medieval Europe, the walls of the bedroom are as thin as the walls of the church itself. The church's hand stretches far beyond the bed, reaching into every secret, every shadow, every breath you take as a wife. Even now, your body is under surveillance, not just by your family or your neighbors, but by God's appointed men, armed with manuals and questions that strip you as surely as the bedding ceremony did. The morning after, confession is waiting for you. The village priest summons you to the dark stone chapel, the air thick with incense and old secrets. He asks what happened last night, how it happened, how it felt, if you followed the correct positions. His voice is gentle, almost kind, but his words are knives. Did you bleed? He asks. Did you endure as a wife should, without sinful pleasure? If you falter, if you hesitate, your answers become evidence. You are not alone in this interrogation. Across England and France, priests wield penitential manuals filled with hundreds of questions about marital intimacy. A 14th-century English confessor's guide, preserved in Lambeth Palace Library, lists each forbidden act, each possible deviation. Did thou lie beneath thy husband as the law prescribes? Didst thou seek pleasure, or endure only as duty? Didst thou, in the moment, remember God and the teachings of the Holy Church? Even your thoughts are suspect. If you confess to enjoyment, you risk accusations of sin. If you show reluctance, you risk accusations of withholding. But here's where the nightmare deepens. The church doesn't just police your confessions. It polices your body through medical ignorance, wrapped in the velvet gloves of learned men. Medieval physicians trained at Salerno and Paris study your anatomy through a lens of superstition and error. They believe the hymen is an impenetrable barrier, a veil that must be torn by the rightful husband. If it remains after marriage, you are accused of fraud. If it is missing before marriage, you are accused of shame. Historical records make it clear. In 1340, a bride named Alice of Shropshire was brought before the bishop's court because her virginal sign was judged to be absent. The midwife, the priest, even the village reeve inspected her body. Their verdict: Alice was damaged goods, fit only for penance or banishment. Her real crime was not her body, but the ignorance of those who claimed to understand it. But the horror goes further. Medieval physicians claimed that a woman's womb is a vessel easily corrupted by desire, by demons, by the wrong kind of pleasure. Thomas Aquinas, whose words shaped 1,000 laws, declared in his Summa Theologica that the woman who seeks pleasure beyond her station is an adulteress in spirit. These doctrines filter down into law and custom. If you suffer in silence, you are praised. If you show any joy, you risk being called a temptress, or worse, a witch. And here's what they don't tell you. The very test of your pain becomes a test of your faith. If you did not bleed, the priest may prescribe fasting, flagellation, or months of public penance. The church's court can annul your marriage, force you to remarry, or send you to a convent for correction. In a 1362 case from Canterbury, a bride named Joanna was denied the sacrament until she confessed to the sin of pleasure on her wedding night. The community watched her kneel in the mud outside the chapel, her hair shorn, her fate a warning. But this isn't the worst part. If suspicion falls on you for being tainted, the danger is not just shame, but violence. Rumors spread like wildfire. It takes only a whisper. She did not bleed. She cried too little. She smiled at her husband. For the entire village to turn against you. Women accused of failing the tests have been lynched, burned, or drowned as witches, their bodies left as warnings for others. And still, the Church's grip tightens. Every Lent, every Advent, every holy day, new prohibitions arrive. No marital union on feast days, no intimacy during menses or pregnancy, no pleasure outside the sacred script. Failure means confession, penance, punishment. The priest listens for any hint of deviation, recording every word in his ledger. Your life is an open book, written in someone else's hand. You might think, surely these are rare cases, stories whispered in dark corners. But documentary anchors tell a different story. The records of Bishop Grandisson of Exeter, 1330. Let all parish priests inquire strictly of their flock regarding the customs of the marriage bed, lest sin fester unseen. Parish registers overflow with such orders, directives to inspect, interrogate, and correct any who deviate. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. The community itself is enlisted as an army of informers. Your mother-in-law, your neighbors, even children are taught to watch for signs of improper conduct. In some towns, the bishop's officers arrive unannounced to question, to search, to threaten. A single accusation is enough to bring the weight of church and law down upon your head. You learn quickly that survival depends on silence, on ritual, on careful performance of suffering. If you are clever, you hide your tears, feign your pain, and never, ever confess to desire. You cling to old women's advice, how to mimic agony, how to paint the sheets, how to avoid the priest's gaze. Even so, the threat never leaves you. You sleep with one eye open, knowing the next knock at the door could mean your end. But the truth is far worse. These rituals, these interrogations and inspections, are not rare anomalies. They are the structure of medieval life, built into every parish, every law, every prayer uttered in the dark. What you endure is not an accident, but the cold machinery of a world that values obedience over love, pain over pleasure, silence over truth. And as you sit in the chapel, your head bowed before the priest, you realize your wedding night was never just one night. It was a lifetime sentence, written in blood and fear, enforced by faith and measured by pain. And what happens next, in the eyes of God and man, will make you question whether freedom or love was ever meant for you at all. You try to tell yourself that survival is enough. You pass their test. Barely. The bloodied sheet hangs from your window, a trophy not of love, but of compliance. Yet you sense that your life has narrowed to a single question. What is a peasant bride worth when her only value is pain and proof? Your virginity is not just a private matter. It is the family's currency, measured in dowry, land, and alliances. The cloth on your bed is proof of honor, a certificate more valuable than any written deed. If you pass, your family's status is preserved, your dowry secure. But if you fail, everything changes. In the eyes of the village, you are tainted. Your family's bargain is broken. You become a debt, a liability, an outcast in your own home. In the parish records of Suffolk, 1391, the fate of unproven brides is laid out with chilling clarity. One girl, Alice, was forced into servitude in a distant household after her marriage was annulled for lack of evidence. Her family forfeited their sheep, their harvest, even the clay rights to their fields. The economic fallout echoes for generations. Her sisters married off for lesser dowries, her brothers shunned from village contracts. Your body is not just yours. It is the fulcrum of survival for everyone who shares your blood. But here's where it gets even darker. If you are cast out, there are few places to go. Some end up in the kitchens of distant lords, scrubbing pots until their hands bleed. Others vanish into the shadows, living on the charity of distant kin, begging at church doors, or worse, sold to the margins where shame is a commodity. The punishment is not only exile, but obliteration. Your name disappears from the rolls, your story reduced to a warning whispered to the next generation. And yet, the system breeds its own countermeasures. You learn that women have secrets, tactics passed from mother to daughter, sharp pins hidden in sleeves to prick a finger, animal blood mixed with wine and smeared across linen, even scraps of old cloth stained in advance and smuggled into the marriage bed. The village midwife knows the trick of mixing herbs to cause a bleeding, risky and dangerous, but sometimes the only hope. These are not acts of rebellion. They are acts of survival. But the risks are enormous. If you are caught faking, the consequences are worse than failure. Public whippings in the churchyard, heads shaved and faces branded, the pain meant to burn the lesson into every young woman who watches. A statute from 1376 in the Midlands records a bride stripped naked, paraded through the square, and whipped until she collapsed, accused of deceiving her husband with false blood. Her family was fined, their home seized, their youngest daughter sent to a nunnery as payment. The church offers no sanctuary. The priest, the same man who pressed your hand at the altar, now demands confession, repentance, penance. He asks if you lied, if you were complicit in your own humiliation. The laws are clear. A bride who deceives forfeits all claims, her family at the mercy of lord and law. Ecclesiastical courts are merciless. Documents from the bishop's registry at Ely show lists of brides discredited and abjured, their sentences sealed with the sign of the cross. And still, the cycle continues. Each year, new girls are married, new tests enacted, new betrayals hidden beneath layers of ritual. Mothers whisper advice in the dark, how to act, how to scream, how to endure. But the system is relentless. Even those who survive are marked forever. You see it in the downcast eyes of your sisters, the way your mother's hands tremble when she speaks of her own wedding night. You realize the truth. This is not just your story, but the fate of every woman you know. But here's where the ritual burrows deepest. Your suffering is normalized, explained away as tradition, as faith, as law. When you walk through the market, the butcher's wife nods in sympathy. The baker's daughter glances away in shame. The old women know your pain by heart. Yet no one challenges the system. Instead, the community gathers closer, protecting itself with silence, closing ranks around the very violence that holds it together. And if you think there is safety in obedience, think again. The next test is always waiting: the birth of your first child, the scrutiny of your in-laws, the judgment of the priest every Easter. There is always a price to be paid, another debt to the past. If you falter, the same rituals will turn against you, devouring all that you have gained. You begin to understand. Pain is not an accident, but a requirement. Your endurance is the village's assurance that order is kept, property is safe, honor is preserved. In exchange for your suffering, your family is allowed to exist another year, another generation. And yet, as you gaze out the tiny window of your husband's house, clutching the sheet that cost you so dearly, you wonder if anyone will remember who you were before the blood, before the law, before the ritual. The answer, whispered from one trembling bride to the next, is always the same. Survival is its own kind of victory, even when it means losing everything else. But what comes next will expose just how deep the cruelty runs, and how a single mistake, a single accusation, can destroy not just your body, but your very soul. Imagine waking to the sound of heavy footsteps on the dirt outside your cottage, voices hushed but urgent. You know before you open your eyes that they have come for you. Another rumor has reached the priest. A neighbor claims your screams were too faint, your wedding sheet too conveniently stained. Once again, your body is summoned as evidence. The villagers file in, faces familiar but expressions hard as stone. Your mother tries to shield you, but the community's will is absolute. The midwife is called. This time, the examination is not gentle. Fingers probe, questions cut deep, and every answer is twisted against you. Was she truly a virgin? Did she hide the truth? The pain returns, sharper now for being sanctioned by the people you have known your whole life. In the square, men and women gather to hear the verdict. Your childhood friends avert their eyes. The local reeve stands by, recording every accusation. The parish priest reads from the canon, "For the wages of deception are disgrace and exile." No one comes to your defense. If you are found guilty, there is no appeal. The law is clear. The customs older than memory. You think this horror cannot escalate, but it does. In one case from Kent, preserved in the churchwarden's rolls of 1403, a young bride named Johanna was dragged before the whole village after her husband's family accused her of fraud. She was stripped to her shift, hair shorn, and forced to confess her sin in front of the congregation. The humiliation was meant to purify, but it left her broken, unable to show her face again. She vanished soon after, some say to a distant city, others to a watery grave. But here's where it becomes a living nightmare. Your accusers are not just officials. They are your kin, your neighbors, your friends. The ritual of punishment is a communal act. The smith's wife who once gave you bread, the carpenter whose son you played with as a child, now they turn against you, eager to protect the fragile fabric of their own families by tearing yours apart. Pain is normalized, cruelty rationalized, and the spectacle of your shame becomes a lesson for every girl who watches. No matter how the evidence is gathered, the consequences are devastating. The dowry is forfeited, your husband's family demands restitution, your own parents face public censure and economic ruin. In the parish annals of Lincolnshire, a case is recorded where an entire family was driven from their village after their daughter's marriage was annulled. Their home was burned, their animals seized, their names erased from the records, all because a single night failed to produce the right proof. Yet perhaps the most disturbing revelation is that this violence is not seen as violence. The people do not think of themselves as cruel. To them, the ritual is as natural as planting in spring or reaping in autumn. The priest preaches that suffering cleanses sin. The elders insist that order must be kept. Even the victims begin to believe it. You start to doubt your own memory. Was the pain really so bad? Was the ritual so monstrous? Or is this simply how things are? Sometimes a woman endures her ordeal only to face new accusations years later. If a marriage proves childless, or if a husband dies young, the village whispers start again. The bedding night is exhumed, the old sheet questioned. The bride's reputation dragged once more through mud and memory. You live with the knowledge that your innocence can never be proved, only lost, only taken. The normalization is total. By the fireside, the old women recall their own suffering, passing on advice for surviving what cannot be avoided. They teach their daughters how to fake pain, how to stain linen, how to keep secrets that are not secrets at all. Even men who should know better close their eyes to the brutality, muttering prayers for order and prosperity. But in every parish, the records tell the truth that the living will not speak. The story of Isabella of Normandy, whose wedding night in 1367 ended with no blood and a trial before the bishop. She was examined by the priest and 2 midwives, accused of deceiving both families, and forced into years of servitude. Her fate is just one of hundreds. Hundreds of women erased, punished, or exiled for failing to meet a standard written in ignorance and fear. And still, the cycle grinds on. Every marriage, every night of pain, every bloodied sheet becomes another brick in the wall that imprisons you. The system ensures that you are never fully free, that your suffering is never fully your own. The people around you, bound by duty and fear, reinforce the very rules that keep them powerless. The ritual is self-perpetuating, feeding on shame and silence, leaving scars that never heal. But even as you swallow your grief, you begin to sense a deeper horror, one that cannot be named aloud. What if the real crime is not your supposed impurity, but the cruelty of a world that demands such suffering and calls it justice? What if the very people who punish you are, in truth, the ones most afraid of chaos, of change, of the loss of the order their violence sustains? The question hangs in the air, unspoken, and as you are led back to your darkened home, you realize that the story is not just yours, but the story of a world built on pain, enforced by the hands of those who love you most. Still, the ceremony is not over. There is one revelation left, one that will lay bare the true cost of obedience and the darkness that shadows every medieval bride. Now imagine the coldest morning of your life. You are roused from uneasy sleep by the clatter of hooves and the sharp command of the reeve. Word has spread. A bride from the next village failed the test. The priest doubts her story, and a tribunal has been called. You are forced to witness what happens to women who cannot provide what the law and the church demand. You stand in the mud, clutching your shawl, as they bring her out. Her name is Agnes. She is 16, her hair hacked short, her eyes hollow with terror. The elders line up, faces drawn tight with righteous purpose. The midwife recites her findings. No proof. Suspected deceit. The priest intones a prayer for purity, but the words twist like barbed wire. The entire village watches as Agnes is stripped, her back bared for punishment. The whip cracks once, twice, 10 times. Each blow lands not just on her flesh, but on every girl who stands shivering in the crowd. Blood stains the earth. When it is over, Agnes is banished, sent alone into the forests, her body marked, her future erased. The silence that follows is a warning. This is what happens to those who fail. And you realize the truth. Your wedding night never really ends. Every moment is a new test. Every day another trial by suspicion. The terror is systematic, but so is the indifference. The faces around you are unreadable. Some watch in pity, some with relief that it is not their daughter, some with a cold satisfaction that the old rules hold firm. Even your mother, standing at your side, says nothing. The lesson is clear. Do not trust, do not falter, do not hope for mercy. The law is the law. The ritual must be obeyed. But the real horror is not the violence itself, but its acceptance. This system has become so normalized that people call it justice. The priest reads from his ledger, "Order preserved, virtue defended." The Lord's steward notes the fines collected, the goods seized from Agnes's family. No one speaks her name again. In this world, suffering is simply the price of peace. You return home, carrying the image of Agnes with you, knowing that your own fate hangs by a thread. Even the smallest accusation, a sideways glance, a rumor whispered at the well, could bring the same fate to your door. You move through your days in silence, avoiding the gaze of men, learning to hide your scars beneath duty and obedience. Yet, in the privacy of your own mind, the questions will not die. Is this the only way? Must every generation endure what you have endured? What if there is another future? One where a woman's worth is not measured by blood or pain, where a family's honor is not built on her suffering. You search the faces of your sisters, your friends, your daughters, and wonder if they too carry this quiet rebellion in their hearts. The centuries pass, but the scars remain. Even when the rituals fade, their memory lingers in every whispered warning, every mother's anxious glance, every law that seeks to control a woman's body. You come to see that survival is not enough. The price of peace has been too high, paid in the pain of generations. But here is the final, bitter revelation. The true machinery of control was never just the church or the law. It was the silent complicity of the community, the way your neighbors watched, judged, and enforced your suffering. Your story was never just yours. It was the engine of a world built on fear and submission. If you have reached this point, you see the truth hidden in shadow, the forgotten voices, the buried grief, the cost of obedience in a world that demanded so much from its daughters. And if this journey has changed how you see history, if you feel the weight of these revelations and hunger for truths that textbooks refuse to teach, subscribe now. Let your understanding become power. The real stories of the past are waiting in the darkness, and only by unearthing them can you see the world as it truly is. You came into this story thinking marriage was a private joy, a bond of love. Now you leave knowing that, for countless women, it was a trial by fire, a ritual of pain, a negotiation for survival. But knowledge is the first act of rebellion. Carry it with you. Let it burn in your mind. And never forget what women like Agnes endured so that others might someday be free.